Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending our final Falls Free Friday of 2025. My name is Jill Woodard, and I work with the Injury Prevention Research Center. I will be facilitating the session today with Mia and Megan. And to start, we'd just like to go over a couple of housekeeping items. This presentation is recorded and will be available via the Injury Prevention Research Center at Emory's YouTube channel. To reduce background noise, we do ask that you keep yourself muted for the first portion of the session today. Once we reach the discussion portion at the end of the presentation, you are welcome to unmute and ask your questions. You can also use the chat box at any time if you'd prefer to stay on mute. If we do not have time to address all the questions, we will be sure to get the answer back to you. And we would like to thank the entire Fall Prevention Task Force for their dedication and expertise in bringing you this virtual session today. This Falls Free session is titled, "Are College Students Too Old for Safety Rails? Don't Fall for That." I would like to introduce our speaker for today's session, Mary Ellen Jacobs with Shepherd Center and Rails Against Danger. Mary Ellen Jacobs is the founder of Rail Against Danger, RAD, a nonprofit 501(c)(3) initiative dedicated to preventing injuries and deaths from bunk and loft bed falls in the college setting. Inspired by her family's personal experience, she has become a national advocate for improved campus safety, working with universities, healthcare professionals, and policymakers to raise awareness and implement preventative measures. Through RAD, Mary Ellen combines public health advocacy, education, and lived experience to help protect students and reduce preventable fall injuries. Ms. Jacobs joined the staff of Shepherd Center in 2019 as the ABI Peer Support Lead, working with families in the acute rehab setting to offer empathy and understanding as they face a loved one's catastrophic injury. Through her role at Shepherd, Mary Ellen became involved with the iPrice TBI Task Force and seeks to further much needed research in the 18 to 25 age group involving serious injuries and deaths that occur on college campuses. Recently retired, Mary Ellen plans to rededicate her efforts with other college safety advocates to pass legislation that will shine a light on college safety concerns. Without further ado, I will pass it over to Mary Ellen.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. Like I said, this is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. So Rail Against the Danger is my baby, and it was created in 2015, literally just within just a month or so after my son had his accident. And it happened kind of the title came from sitting in the coffee kiosk at Shepherd, and I was trying to decide what I wanted to call it, and I kept talking about danger and rails, and I thought it just popped in my head. I was before I did all this stuff, I was actually for years and years, probably like 35 or 40 years, a marketer and graphic designer. So that came in handy when I went to create a nonprofit organization. I didn't have to turn to a expensive agency to do my branding and my marketing. I was able to do it myself. So that was kind of handy. And as I was sitting there, I thought, well, we're trying to prevent the danger. We're railing against it. Oh, rail against the danger. So that's how the name came up. And then the tagline, like I told Megan, my tagline, it used to say, "Are you too cool? Think you're too cool for a safety rail? Don't fall for that." But then I kind of tweaked it a couple different times. Actually, I used different words, but I kind of use the old more often because I think that's the perception of students that students sometimes have is, well, I don't need that. I'm not a toddler. Their memory is of that toddler bed um, when they were 2 or 3 to keep them from falling out of bed, and that's so they associate it with the baby thing, and it's really not a baby thing. So as we know through what y'all do, the research mainly falls on older and younger, the age groups that are the elderly and little kids. But there's a vast amount of injuries in between, and that's what I'm trying to bring attention to with RAD and with my college safety advocacy. So I'll show you our little, if you've not already seen it, our sad little PSA. I have shown this so many times and very often do it like I am today. I'll show it at the beginning of a presentation because it's a little bit of a, this was initially aimed at parents and at students, especially students, but kind of to tweak their heartstrings a little bit about what it's like to be a mother. And you let your baby fly off to college and something terrible happens. So that's kind of where we went with this. Whoops, sorry guys, let me go back one.
Every parent loves watching their child learn to walk and talk and feed themselves, but no parent wants to watch them have to learn to do it all over again. When my son Clark fell out of his 7-foot lofted bed at college, he fractured his skull. It led to 2 brain surgeries, a stroke, multiple CT scans, ventilators, feeding tubes, dozens of prescription medications, and so much more. I'll never forget sitting by his bed for 2.5 months while he was comatose, battling infections, fevers, and blood clots. Clark lost 1.5 years of his life, and he almost died. Eventually, he had to endure brutally intense physical therapy because at this point, he could do nothing on his own. As his mom, I was by his side as he had to learn to do everything all over again. If you think that safety rails are only for babies, imagine having your parents feed you, bathe you, and change your diapers at 20 years old. All of this physical, mental, and emotional anguish could have been prevented with a simple safety rail on that lofted bed. Please, please protect yourself by putting a rail on your loft or bunk bed. Do it for yourself.
Do it for your mom.
So obviously that was purposely kind of grim to show that, yeah, not every kid who falls out of a lofted bed has this happen, but it does happen way more often than people think. And I think it hopefully got a few kids to think about, okay, what does it hurt to put a safety rail on a bed? It could prevent something really terrible happening. And we've seen injuries that are related to bunk bed injuries that range anywhere from knocking a tooth out, bruises, bumps and bruises, spinal cord injuries, paralysis, as when my son almost died, and there's been deaths as well. And my point when I show this at most of the places I present to is I have one of those safety rails with me, and it's at the time maybe 5 or 6 years ago, it's $40 for the school to put it on there as far as the product itself. And I was like, $40 for the safety rail. My son's care was over $1 million. So the math there is pretty obvious that it's an easy to fix, very preventable injury. So I added this picture. This is actually created by AI, which I thought was kind of cool because you would never get a picture like that, nor would I want one, right? I would not want any family, if they had such a picture, which they probably don't, I would never want them to have to share that with me or put cause them any pain by showing this picture. But at least it kind of gets the idea off that these beds are high. My son's bed was almost 7 feet off the ground. He was in a fraternity house that had the built-ins, and every single bunk bed in that house, almost 50 beds, were where you could walk under the bed to your other living area, as far as like your chest of drawers, your desk, closet. And my son is 6'5" and could walk under it. So that's pretty tall. So this is, y'all are very familiar with the CDC, and that's according to the CDC, TBIs happen most often, falls as the second leading cause of TBIs, and happen most often among the youngest and oldest age groups. Falls lead to nearly half of TBI hospitalizations. And then I, of course, put my little asterisk, which I'm very passionate about, is there's no data being collected in that 18 to 25-year-old age group. So this is about the prevalence in falls. This is, I didn't want to muddy this up with a bunch of footnotes, but I have research to back up all this. If you guys would like to see it, or, PDFs and sources and everything. But this top one was the one that kind of got me, it was before 2018 when I started. So it must have been, I had read that there were, 600, 700,000 or 71,000 rather, injuries in the ER every year related to bunk and loft beds. So 71,000 is a big number. Now, are all those falls, all those falls from the bed? Could it be from the ladder? Could it be horsing around on the bed with little kids? Who knows? But they said that the most notable thing to me was that the 18 to 20 age group is more likely to suffer serious injuries compared to the teens, like 13 to 16, with falls accounting for 75% of the cases. So, and then this second study was one that was done in the educational setting. And they found that, if we're looking at a rough number, 8,200 injuries during that time period, that's still a pretty significant amount of injuries. And the only place you can find numbers on bunk bed falls is pretty much emergency room. There's no, you don't see, in the media typically focuses in on a fall or a tragic thing when it happens. Like my son's injury was all over the networks, all over media, including national media. And then you kind of quietly goes away. And there have been some very high profile cases that have been in the news in the last several years. Dylan Hernandez was a young college student, fell out of his loft bed at San Diego State, died from his brain hemorrhage. His parents sued the school, the fraternity, and the bunk bed manufacturer and won all three suits. But it just settles out of court and goes away. No one ever hears about it anymore. So we don't have any data to show that what happened and what, that yes, the fraternity and the university admitted fault and paid. So that's that's a much longer conversation, a whole different presentation. So we'll just move on from there. So this chart came from a residence hall, EduRisk. It's a company that actually is a risk prevention company for colleges. And this was one of the charts that I pulled from it. But they have a whole section in that same PDF about why colleges and universities should have rails on their beds. Like, it's not even a question. You should have safety rails on your beds, but so many of them don't do it because they don't have to do it. This particular one was very prevalent and easy to find on the internet. And suddenly in the last 4 or 5 years, it kind of disappeared. I still have it. But I couldn't find it when I went to look for it a couple of years ago. But the CPSC requires for beds to have, beds sold in the private sector to have safety rails sold with the bed, but no such requirement exists for institutional beds. I think, again, when I spoke with the University System of Georgia, when I first started my campaign to get Georgia to be rails on, they kind of had the attitude, which I'm sure a lot of colleges do, that, well, they're 18, they should be able to recognize danger. And as you all probably know from studying the things you study, 18-year-olds don't have the frontal cortex capacity to recognize danger. 25 is when that kicks in. So they're already well through school by the time they get their full brain capacity going. But I feel like safety rails should be on, and it should be the default position. And if you're, as a school, since they're the ones who supply the beds, I feel like that should be the top priority, is making it the safest way possible. And then you put in the language, if you take the rail, this is what the University System of Georgia does. In their residence hall contract, there's a line item, which I'm sure none of the parents ever see, that says, if you remove the safety rail, you assume liability. Well, let's be honest, who's assuming liability? The parents are assuming liability. But they never see the residence contract because the kid's 18 years old. So this is a dear friend of mine that's actually on the College Safety Coalition with me. We formed a coalition of other parents who have similar really not similar in scope as far as the point of injury, but other parents who have formed their own initiatives from college injuries of their own children. And I should say college deaths, because there's 9 parents represented on our board, and I'm the only one that still has my kid. They've all had accidents that happened and took the lives of their children at college. So we formed the College Safety Coalition, and Elizabeth's quote I loved. She said, "All injury prevention strategies are based on knowledge of previous incidents." So if we're basing our strategies and our safety strategies on that and prevention strategies, how do we do that if we're not collecting the data to do it? If we don't know where the dangers and the loopholes and the safety gaps are, then how are we making safety policy? And this is just kind of like basic things that can be done to reduce the risk of falls. Obviously, I don't know if y'all are familiar, have students in college or have friends that have students in college. The big thing anymore in schools is, the mattresses are terribly uncomfortable. I remember when I went to college back in the Stone Age, it hasn't changed. Those mattresses are horrible. So all the kids stack up mattress pads and toppers and stuff to make the bed more comfortable. Well, in the meantime, you've got these safety rails. If they do provide them, they're probably older and they're not tall enough. So when they stack all their bedding up, they end up being within an inch or so of the top of the safety rail, which can cause roll right over the top of it because you've got such a cushy bed. And then most of them do not provide ladders at all. Even the ones that provide rails, a lot of times don't provide ladders. So the kids are literally jumping off their desk onto the bed. They're climbing up the end of the bed and getting onto the bed, jumping off of radiators onto their beds. So obviously, I feel like a ladder would go a long way to make things a little bit safer. Ensure the beds still meet the current safety standards. Again, talking about the cushy mattress pads. Label the top bunk or loft as a fall risk without a safety rail. I mean, I don't know about y'all, I have a hair straightener that I use that has a label on it about this big that tells me not to straighten my eyelashes with it. Well, I haven't done that, and I imagine somebody must have, or there wouldn't be a label that large on a hair straightener. But why aren't we at least providing the basic education? Even if say the school has the rails to offer, they're not on the bed. This is a fall risk. You might want to consider a safety rail. But of course, what ends up happening there, it's a real slippery slope legally. So if the school, I found this out when University System of Georgia decided to go rails on in 2019. If you say it's a risk, it's a big liability for the school because you're pointing out the risk. So they feel like that if something does happen, they could get sued. But in reality, if you are a state school, you are very well protected legally. I'll get into that a little bit later. But anyway, so changes in institutional bed design, if we can build a better mousetrap, if you will, safety rail that's useful and yet provides safety, we've solved the problem. So that's the one thing, Jill, back to your retirement discussion, I would like to, I'm going to dive into that a little more deeply now that I have more time. I really want to get the safety, the school residence hall furniture manufacturers to get on board with, why don't you create a rail that's functional? Maybe it's part of the bed and it's got a place to charge a laptop and a place to hold a bottle of water and maybe some storage. The kids would love it. The parents would love it because those rooms are so tight. There's no storage anywhere, and it would solve the problem. It would also give them a little more privacy. So I would really like to get the builders on board, because once that, I know they have a lot of furniture out there that's still being used, but down the road, let's move toward solving the problem on the manufacturing end, and then we don't have the problem. So this was real quickly, I won't read all this to you guys, that's in the deck, but this was a case of a young woman who reached out to me. She was at Valdosta State in Georgia, University System of Georgia in 2016. And she and her friend from high school roomed together. They came to school. She sees her lofted bed, asks to have it lowered. They don't come. Then she asks for a safety rail. The safety rail doesn't arrive. Well, she ends up falling out of her bed. And she sued the school. And her case was thrown out on appeal because of a what do you call it? a liability law in Georgia that says it's basically saying that Elizabeth shouldn't have slept in the bed because she knew it was dangerous. So instead of the school taking responsibility for their bed, they blamed it on the 18-year-old and said she shouldn't have slept in the bed they provided her to go to school. So that was an interesting case that really, I don't want to say any cuss words this morning, so I'm just going to move on. So on my website, we have a wall of fame and wall of shame. And so I don't necessarily ask, I don't put it on there. The parents go to the website, they fill out whether their school's doing it right or wrong. Maybe they post some photos, give me here's why I put my son's school or daughter's school on the wall of fame or the wall of shame. And so over in the beginning, we had way more schools on the wall of shame than on the wall of fame. So we're hoping, and I still don't have as many as I would like on there, but starting this fall, I'm going to send each school that's on there a letter to their housing director, letting them know, hey, you're on the wall of fame, good job with safety rails, or you're on the wall of shame. You might want to look at changing your policy. So the other thing I do with parents that I get tons of emails every fall semester of parents looking for safety rails. And because it's in my name, they think that I somehow have a magic, solution, which I don't, because A, I don't know what their bed looks like. B, I don't want the liability of suggesting a rail that's not even really necessarily meant for that bed to use that. But I kind of give them suggestions. Like, here's some links from Amazon that other people have used. But I urge them to go to their housing director and talk to them and say, why aren't you not? And then I said, show them my website. Tell them what happened to my son. Tell them what's happened to other kids on our wall of testimonials, and let them know that they need to make a change. I think the more parents I can get involved in making some noise, the parents are the ones paying the bills. And I remind them of that. I say, you're paying a lot of money for this unsafe bed, so go let the housing department know about it. And this was our announcement when we began trying to get safety rails in the system of Georgia in 2015, right after my son's, I think it was the fall of that year, I met with them the first time. They had no safety rail policy in place whatsoever. Didn't even know who had rails, who didn't have rails, whether they should or should not. So they did a survey and found out who had rails, what they were currently doing. And then by 17, I believe they had every school that offered bunk and loft beds had to have safety rails to offer. That was better, but that still wasn't what I wanted. I wanted the rails on the bed, default position. If they want to make the liability clause and have them if they take it off, they assume liability. I'm okay with that. I want them educated in the best safe way to be the default way. So finally, in fall of 2019, I got my wish, and the University System of Georgia put safety rails on all bunks and lofts in all 26 of their schools in the state. So now I just got 49 more to go. No big deal. So what's next for RAD is I had mentioned my College Safety Coalition. Nanette Hausman is my co-founder. Unfortunately, I lost her to cancer 2 years ago. Her son was injured and subsequently died 6 hours after an injury from a skateboard on campus, in an unsafe path that he was a freshman, didn't know. There's no signs posted, no nothing. And he was an expert skateboarder, went down this path and had a terrible fall and brain injury and passed away. So she and I linked arms, and then we found a bunch of other people, a bunch of other parents who are doing similar work in the college safety field. And we all came together collectively to hopefully get legislation passed. And it's called the Corey Safety Act, which is named for her son, Corey. It really stands for College Operational Reporting of, big long acronym, but Corey's his name. It's currently in committee in the U.S. House and Senate, and it would require, I'm not sure have you guys heard of the Clary Act? The Clary Act was created by a family whose daughter, Jean Clary, back in, I want to say the late 90s, might have been 1999, was away at college at Lehigh University, which is, I think, if it's not Ivy League, it's a really, really nice school. She was unfortunately in her dorm room assaulted raped and murdered by an intruder. And when her family went to look at the statistics, crime statistics, they were shocked at how much crime was around that college, and they had no knowledge of it at all. So the Clery Act actually requires colleges to report assaults, crimes, and fires on campus, fire safety and things like that. But there is no such requirement for accidents on campus that cause serious injury and death. So we are trying to get the Clery Act either to coincide with the Clery Act by expanding the Clery Act, or another bill that would be using the Clery mechanism as far as the reporting goes, but to require colleges that participate in Title IV HEA federal funding to report and record their serious injuries that cause, their accidents and incidents that cause serious injury and death. So at the bottom, I obviously put, without good data, we'll never be able to prevent future accidents. And we have questions and answers. If anybody has any questions.
Thank you so much, Mary Ellen. I can jump in
Absolutely.
with a couple of questions
Okay.
if others don't, or maybe while they're thinking of their questions. What barriers have you faced in getting more research attention on this issue?
I would think, well, recently in the last year or so, I think the barrier is we've had so much funding cuts with TBI, with the CDC. We were very close to, in fact, we right now, instead of trying to get the bill passed, we're kind of on hold with that right now because we would need to get a new bill number and all that stuff. But what we're trying to do now is to go appropriations wise and see, it's kind of like a feasibility, asking for a feasibility study through the CDC, not asking for direct funding right now, but saying, could we look at the feasibility of what it would be to get a study done in this college segment, in this age group? So I would, the jaded side of me, Jill, would say that higher education can often be a stumbling block for us. They're very well armed lobbyist wise. I've had other friends on my safety coalition, college safety coalition, that have gotten close to making some real changes, and then suddenly the door closes. It's just, I guess a lot of it's just a liability situation for the schools. And it does open up a lot of, I'm not saying that they're not right, but at the same time, what we're trying to focus on, instead of it being a contentious relationship, we're trying to focus on, let's join hands to make campuses safer. We can help through the data show you the gaps on your campus, which in turn helps injury prevention, which in turn reduces injury, which in turn reduces hospitalizations, and God knows it reduces parent anxiety and grief from parents who have lost their children. It just sounds like I think there can be a cooperative way to make this happen. But yeah, funding is huge. We would love to be able to just, we had talked about getting a documentary made. And of course, you're looking at millions of dollars. So it's hard for these little mom and pop people like me. My big budget usually for the year is around, $8,000 to $10,000. And I go to a couple seminars and present a couple places and fly a couple places, and I've spent my whole budget. So it's, and then fundraising is great, but I should say I do have time for that now, maybe a little more time than I used to have. But it's just me. I don't have a big staff of people that are doing this. I've had pretty good success with just grassroots, with working through parent groups on the internet. I've met multiple parent websites like Dorm Mamas, and different people who are administrators on those sites are very generous. If I reach out to them initially and let them know who I am, what I'm trying to accomplish, a lot of times they will let me just post whenever I want to post and put, hey, go to our website and check this out, or here's Clark's story, here's our video. So there's been a lot over the last 10 years. There's been a lot of grassroots movement that I'm so proud of, because the new year is coming up, the fall semester's coming up, and I'll go onto a website And there's already all these posts about Rail Against the Danger. People are already putting it out there. So that makes me happy that the word is getting out and people are starting to respond to it.
Are there other ways that community organizations you think could help with getting the word out?
Like, which do you have any community organizations in particular?
No, just um, kind of like the people that are on this call who work with organizations or injury prevention
Gotcha.
organizations that are kind of present. How could they best like talk about this and or help like raise awareness?
Right. Yeah, I'm open to anything. I've done talks with I will literally go and present to anybody who will have me. Can you guys hear my dog, or is he not? Okay, good. He's barking, so I'm like, oh God. Um, but I will literally go any place. Like I said, with the furniture manufacturer, I've gone to a couple conferences. I actually would love to go to some fraternal organization conferences, nationwide conferences of the people that own house corporations and have fraternity and sorority houses on campus, because they in particular are private. My son was injured in a private house right in the middle of Georgia Tech's campus, mind you, but a private house owned by a private corporation. So as it turned out, the night that my son had that terrible injury, that was a brand new fraternity house, is only a year and a half old. The night that he almost lost his life on the floor, that fraternity house did not have liability insurance. It had not transferred over to their new house. Thank goodness we didn't have to pursue anything that way. My son's recovery has been very good. Now he's 30. He's going to be 31 in November. He graduated from Georgia Tech in 2020 with his mechanical engineering degree. It was very, very hard. He was in his second year when he was injured in 2015. So it took him another 4 or 5 years to finish, but he did it. And he's got a wonderful life. He lives independently. But I think of how close we came to losing him and how preventable this is. But if you believe me, if you have any suggestions or an avenue that you think would be great for me to talk to, I will go talk to him.
You. I'll pause and see if other people have questions right now.
I know I stuck it in the chat too, but I can come off mute and ask as well. So I know you touched on a few other stories and a few other legislative acts that have been put into place, but other than RAD, are there other awareness campaigns that could help reduce that stigma around safety rails that you mentioned that safety rails are for children or things like that? How can we reduce that stigma around that college age?
Right. It's funny, believe it or not, I think I'm the only one that's out there really talking about it. And the funny thing is, when I was alluding to the lack of data and the lack of finding anything on the internet about it, every year, like I said, when I kind of fire up my social media campaigns and get things going, I get so many. I mean, you'll look at a chat like on a Facebook page when someone says, "Oh, I never thought about that," and someone will say, "Oh, well, the kid down the hall from my kid fell last semester and had to check out of school." And so there's all this, uh, you know, secondhand data. In fact, sometimes I'll reach out to those very people and say, "Would you mind telling me what school that was at?" And you try to find it, and you can't find it.
Mm.
And I think a lot of times when people, my friend Nanette that I spoke of, she did lose her child, and she said, I think people either go away and just they're so grief stricken they can't. And believe me, I get that. I was terribly grief stricken, but I also had a fire in my belly about not letting this happen to anybody else. It'd be especially because it's so easy. It's so easy to prevent it, and I just feel like there's definitely a better way to do it. One time, I think it was in 2017, my son and I did 11 or 15, I think they call them facet, the freshman orientations at Tech. And so we tabled at 15 different orientations, and we had a big tall banner that said our tagline. It had a bunk bed and said, "Think you're too old for a safety rail," and a picture of my son in that terrible all tubes pictures that don't fall for that. And so we had a lot of students coming up to us telling us at Facet, I had to sleep in one of those beds last night. I was scared to death because a lot of these kids go away from home to
Mhm.
school. They probably slept in a queen bed their whole life. Now they're 6 feet off the ground on this little skinny twin. Whereas if you just roll one way, if a wasp, a bad dream, your phone ring, whatever, something jars you awake, you could so easily fall all the way to the ground. So we had a lot of awareness that was built at Tech during that time, and I think, to be honest, I think the housing department, the director, the dean of students realized that they had a chance to be trendsetters. So they did it. Actually, Georgia State was doing it before anybody else. Georgia State has always had that as their policy. If you've got a lofted bed, you've got a rail on it. There's no questions asked. And I think the more ending the stigma, like you said, I think the more we make it just this is the way it is. If you want a loft bed, you have a safety rail. If you want a top bunk, you have a safety rail. If you don't want it, you don't get the bunk. I think this if the school takes a strong stance on it, it'll melt into the woodwork like safety belts have. I mean, I'm young enough to remember the outcry from people. I don't want to wear a seatbelt. Why would no one's going to make me wear a safety belt? Well, guess what? They did. I mean, you can still not wear it, but you can also get fined for it or ticketed for it. But I think it's like anything else. People don't know. You don't know what you don't know. And until we bring awareness to it, it's difficult. But I would like to, I wish I could clone myself into about, 50 people and just shoot out all over the country and go to college campuses and do talks everywhere. But I think I'm going to keep working on it and find ways to, we've had some national media attention. I'd like to get more of that. The CPSC has even talked about partnering with us and with other organizations that are similar to mine, not rail wise, but college safety wise, and doing a college safety campaign before school starts every fall. And I think that could go a long way to helping too. But I just think part of it's pushback of having to do it. I know that Tech spent probably $250,000 to retrofit all their beds with safety rails, but let's be honest, in a college budget, that's not that much money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that you compared it to seatbelts, because now we've just changed the social norm with seatbelts. So majority
Exactly.
of us we get in the car, we click the belt, we don't even think about it. I know myself, I don't even think about it. And then a side comment in regards to your Wall of Shame, Wall of Fame. So my college that I went to, I grew up in Wisconsin. My undergraduate degree, I stayed in dorms, and I'm happy to share that I had a rail on my bunk bed, and that was something that everybody had. If you bunked your bed, you had to get a safety rail. That was just part of it. So happy that I was part of a college that it was part of the social norm, or I don't know if we were required to. It just
Right.
I don't know the legalities of it, but we had safety rails on
Which
all of our
one, Megan?
windows.
What's the name of your school?
Yeah, it was Concordia University
You
of
know what? I'll
Wisconsin.
I'll look and see if they're on ours. If they're not, I'm going to reach out to you and have you put a wall of fame for them.
I was gonna say I'll have to add them. My degree, I went to the University of Milwaukee,
Okay.
University of Wisconsin Milwaukee, and I'm not sure about them because at that point I was no longer in dorms, but my undergraduate
Right.
did. So if they're not already on there, I'm happy to add them.
Okay, great. Yeah, in contrast, I don't think my alma mater does have them. I grew up in Missouri and went to school at back then it was called Southwest Missouri State. Now it's Missouri State and Springfield. I don't think they have mandatory rails. And I'm thinking about now, again, now that I have more time, I think I might reach out to them as an alumnus and say, hmm, maybe I could come talk to you guys about it.
Right? Yeah, you've definitely inspired me to do a little more digging on it. So thanks so much
Well,
for
great. Thank
sharing your
you.
insight and your story. I very much appreciate it.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
It, I wonder if Michigan is on your wall of fame or shame, because back when I
Let
was in
me look
college, it was
here.
definitely like I know I had a dorm room with three of us, and the person who was on the top loft, she ended up falling out a couple of times. Didn't get
Oh,
seriously hurt, but like definitely was like scared of like repeated falling. I also
Right,
wonder if there's a way to sell this to kids, like around that whole privacy thing, that you can, put a little curtain up or something like that that would give you that
right,
sort of like privacy on your bunk that you otherwise don't get to really have. And I could see that as being
right.
very attractive to college students to have. I mean, then people on the
Yes.
lower levels might be like, "Oh, I really want a privacy like rail too,"
Exactly,
so
because
that
they don't
people
have much,
can,
and they've gotten where
yeah,
they cram so many students. A lot of times in these colleges, they have forced triples where you might have three students in one room, and they're to get any space at all, they have to go up. And see,
yep,
this is where I start to get. It's one thing if you have this big gigantic room and you decide to loft your bed. I can almost see the school saying, "Well, you've decided to loft your bed, you take the responsibility." But at the same time, if you are forcing triples and people have nowhere to go but up to get any space at all, then I think maybe we need to look at that and say, you have a responsibility for keeping them safe. I mean, it's your bed. They didn't drag their bed in from home. I mean, the school is
yeah.
providing to me an unsafe bed. And it makes me also wonder, there's so many angles and so many tentacles to this thing. It makes me wonder who's insuring these colleges and saying that's okay. Is it because they don't know how many times the accidents happen? I don't know. Because I can tell you, I don't think there's even in the state of Georgia, I don't think there's a consistent reporting mechanism for, I mean, should it be I don't know, state by state or something that there's a pattern and we all follow it, but there should be, I mean, for every incident and accident that causes a serious injury, if that kid goes away in an ambulance, there needs to be an accounting of that.
Um, how do you feel the bed makers have a responsibility? Like if your bed can be loft, should a rail automatically be part of the package that goes with the lofting?
It's funny you
Um,
say that. I think a lot of the ones that do make beds, this is why I try to tell the parents to go and look and talk to the manufacturers, because I mean to the housing department, because I think a lot of times the rails are there and offered, but the school doesn't necessarily want to pay for them. And that was okay. I didn't bring up this case, but you guys may remember this. It was 3 years ago now, maybe four, that a young man fell from a loft from a upper bunk at the Little League World Series. His name was Easton, and his dad was right there with him. He was in the lower bunk. Easton was in the upper bunk. Easton fell, sustained a brain injury, brain bleed, hemorrhage, and he was very seriously injured. They sued Little League World Series because the beds did not have safety rails on any of them. And see, that's another thing. The whole age liability. I was told that, like at the CPSC, if there's a kid under the age, I think 12 is considered a kid, certainly as an adult, there should have been safety rails on that bed. So they, again, won their suit, settle out of court, don't ever hear about it again. You hear about the salacious part. You hear about all the, oh my God, this poor little boy's in, you know, serious danger. He might die. He's got a brain injury. And then once everything goes down 3 or 4 years till the lawsuit happens, it's forgotten. And then it just settles out of court. And that young man has a brain injury for life. It's not like it goes
yeah.
away. So they were offered safety rails by the bunk bed manufacturer. The bunk bed manufacturer strongly suggested using safety rails, and they didn't do it. So to me, that was a clear cut case of liability. But again, is there something magical that happens when a kid turns 18 or whatever that they don't need a safety rail anymore? I don't think that's true. I know adults don't want to sleep in those beds. When we went, my husband and I hiked up to the Len Foot, I think it's on top of which mountain it is up here in can't think of it. It's up in North Georgia. And we hike to the top and we go into our little place to stay overnight, and it's bunk beds. I'm like, are you serious? I'm not getting up there. And there was no safety rail, so I put a bunch of pillows up and we fashioned something ourselves. But I reached out to the Georgia Park System and told them about it. Never heard anything back. So it's really more of I think it's just like seatbelts. It's in a lot of ways it's just a lack of knowledge of the dangers. And again, if we have on one hand these ER figures that show it's a problem, but that's all we have. We don't have anything saying this school had this many loft bed falls, or this many kids fell out of loft beds or bunk beds this year. Until we get to that point, I don't know if people will take it very seriously. So
Yeah. I wonder if there's something to that whole capturing, like research to be done to capture kind of the spectrum of people that are falling out of bunk beds, like, and from the little babies all the way, or well, I
right,
guess probably not little babies, but like, from whatever age pe parents put their kids into a bunk bed all the way up to like the end of people using bunk beds, because I think there is that
right.
certain age where people no longer want to get up on a bunk bed, like.
Right, exactly. Well,
Um,
and here's another there you just brought up another thing, Jill. So here's these schools, these colleges. What do they do in the summertime? They have summer camps. And those
mhm.
kids are sleeping in those lofted beds and bunk beds. Their parents have no idea what's
No,
going and they okay, if we're not going to protect the college students, can we at least pretend we're going to protect the 10-year-olds that are at lacrosse camp? So I actually did a campaign about that too, about, said, I know you packed your sunscreen and your bug spray, but have you thought about a safety rail for your kid? Because it's
which,
just a no-brainer.
yeah, parents sending their kids off to like camp and stuff, they definitely are not thinking of like safety rails. And I remember
No
being down
fun.
at the your camping experience reminded me of like even like Boy Scouts that has the camp down in
Right.
not St. Simon's Island, but the Jekyll Island right next door.
Yeah,
And they're constantly doing events and they're all bunked beds. And it just made me think there's like all of these spaces where people are probably getting injured and there's no information related to
absolutely.
because it's unless you're I wonder if there's like natural language processing that can be done out of emergency room visits to capture like how the falls happened.
Right.
Um, that
And
might
that's
be
another
a
thing we tried to grab. Okay, so even when we started doing the bill, we had to come up with some language for what is like, how do we classify a fall? And we ended up finding a study in Thailand, I think it was. I found this study that's done in Thailand about about falls from beds. And it was like, less than 1 meter, 1 meter to 3 meters, 3 meters and above kind of thing. And that was what we ended up using as our standard to have something, because when you say ground level fall or fall from a height, well, how high and what's considered high? I mean, obviously, the higher you go, the worse it is. And that young man that rolled over the top of the bed out in San Diego State, the attorney in that case, I've actually been kind of a advisor, if you will, on a couple of cases where I've just given them my research, said, here, use this if this will help. Because I'd love to see the parents at least made whole in these situations. But they actually hired an engineer who talked about, he used the CPSC guidelines and saying, if the CPSC is recommending this to be safe, then why are we not doing it? So he kind of brought it up, and they end up winning that case. And he thinks that the engineer's testimony is what could you talk about the like you God knows I'm 6'1", so when I fall even from as high as I am, it hurts pretty bad. But the higher you go, when you're sleeping, if you're 6 feet off the ground, your head's heavy too. So like you roll out of the bed, head injuries are not uncommon because your head is so heavy, and broken bones, broken ribs, all those things. But like you said, Jill, if no one's reporting it, we're never going to have. And I think with the school part, once that ambulance pulls away, you may or may not ever hear about that again either. So again, like you're saying, the coding, the prevalence becomes important in those numbers. And I guess that's what that one study was trying to prove, that we have a significant number of people that are injured. And so really what's the best answer? I mean, with cars, obviously we have to use cars. So we have to, seatbelts make a great idea. I would love to see people not use bunk beds anymore. I mean, given the what I know of them, I would rather they didn't have them. But if we're going to have them, let's make them safe. And when I was doing this whole thing, also, I found doing my early research, I came across a study or a case where, remember lawn jarts, those missiles that were like they were maybe the whole toy or lawn sport item was probably from tip to tail was probably maybe a foot tall, and it was like this metal spike basically with plastic wings that came off of it, and you would hurl them underhand across the yard or whatever into a hoop like on the ground, and you would whoever almost like playing a bocce ball or uh, cornhole or whatever, but it's just a this heavy thing you would toss. We had them all the time when we were kids. They were called jarts, javelin darts, maybe, I don't know, but they were jarts. And sadly, a case happened one year, this is a long time ago, that the CPSC heard about. Um, a guy tossed one, it went over a fence, like, and hit a little girl right in the head, killed her.
Oh,
So they outlawed darts, jarts. They were taken off the market. He went, he sued and whatever, and they were taken off the market right away. So, and that's horrible. And, but when I look at the prevalence of other injuries that the products aren't even required to have safety features, it just doesn't seem like it's very evenly policed as far as that goes.
yeah.
But if you guys are all very smart ladies and gentlemen, and if you come up with anything that is a great idea, I don't want to say I'm just a mom. I've kind of become an accidental researcher and accidental advocate, but I know what I know from what I've studied. But if you guys ever have any better ideas or a path that you think would be great for me to take, I am ready to go. So you just let me know what you think I need to do.
Any other questions um, before we kind of close out?
Oh, you know what I would do? Let me do this real quick
Mhm.
in the if I can find I'm gonna stop my share here. I'm gonna in the chat bar, I will put a couple websites. Obviously my main one is Rail Against the Danger. I can't type today. Here we go. We have the College Safety Coalition.org. And is it org? And you do this so many times. Sometimes when we were setting it up, I was right. Did we do org or did we do net? Let me see.
I might have stuck that one in while you were speaking.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep, that one's in there, and the Corey Act is in there, and the Rails
Oh,
Against.
thank you. That's awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, and the Corey Safety Act, like I said, we've actually taken down. We did have a UJoin link at there where you're doing some grassroots organization, but now, like I said, our bill is going to be renumbered and all that stuff. So we're kind of a little bit. I don't want to say we're dead in the water because as long as I've got breath in my body, we're not going to be dead in the water. But we're on a little bit of a holding pattern right now, doing what we can to further that study, possibly, or at least get it out there that we'd like to have some appropriations funding to get a study done at the CDC. So we'll see what happens. But if you guys have any questions at all about anything or any suggestions, I'm open to it. And if you want to see any of my research, I'd be happy to send anything too. So just let me know.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. And thank you so much
Absolutely.
for coming today and talking about all of your work. I think this is such an important topic, and I think it's also something different that our Falls Task Force hasn't really thought about before. I know you're active with our TBI task force, and I just love the fact that you were able to come and share how this affects across a different scope of work. Also, I want to say thank you to all of the people that had joined us today. As a reminder, the session is recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel in the upcoming weeks. If you have any additional questions or if you have questions that come up, we are happy to put you in contact with Mary Ellen. As you can tell, she's very approachable and very interested in any sort of insights or thoughts that you all may have. Lastly, there's going to be a brief survey as you close out with a few short questions please complete this for us. It really helps us to keep the sessions going. And all right, pop up. And if anyone has any last remaining questions, we can stay on for a couple more minutes, but otherwise we are hoping that you have a good weekend. The last
Thanks
weekend
again
in
for having me,
September.
everybody. Thanks for listening. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Personal thanks to Megan for inviting me.
Yes, I'm so happy you were able to be here. It's
Me
very
too.
cool to have something a little bit different than kind of my norm, so to speak.
Yeah.
And really happy that it worked out. So thanks so much for your time. I know now that you've retired, we still keep pulling you back in, but so happy that you were able to sneak
That's
into
all
the
right.
Yeah. But I stuck quite a few links in the chat and a few emails in the chat. So if I get anything that comes my way, I will pass it over to you. But that is all I had for today.
And use Megan's link for the coalition because I can't spell, so use the one that she has up at the top.
I tried to follow you as you were going
I'm like,
through
oh no, I spelled it wrong. Coltion, yeah.
Hey, that's right. It's
So
Friday.
good. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everybody.
All right. Thank
Have a
you.
great weekend.
Thanks, everybody.
Megan, are we staying on? Are we still recording?
I'll stop the recording.